In the vibrant rural town of Ebula, nestled between golden farmlands and rustling mango trees, life moves to the rhythm of drums, market songs, and the quiet gaze of elders who've seen too much. It's the kind of place where the scent of roasted maize drifts through the air, children run barefoot on dusty roads, and secrets don't stay buried for long. In Ebula, tradition is law, and the spoken word carries weight heavier than any written paper. People sit under the old baobab tree, not just for shade but for stories, for news, for truth wrapped in whispers. Neighbors know each other's footsteps. A cough at midnight, the next morning, 10 people will have a remedy ready. A new face in town, eyes will follow them from every corner. In Ebula, you don't just live, you're watched, judged, blessed, and warned by the village itself. The community is tightly woven, like kente cloth passed from grandmother to granddaughter, every thread holding history. So when something changes, even slightly, the town feels it like a cold wind in the middle of Harmattan heat. A husband who suddenly becomes too quiet, a wife who starts looking tired without reason, a child who asks questions too grown for their age. Nothing slips past unnoticed, and when a joyful home starts echoing with silence, Ebula prepares, because in this town, evil doesn't knock. It slides under doors, smiling. This is where the story begins. In Ebula, a place where even the breeze seems to carry tales, and one such tale was about to shake the village. A tale of trust broken, food shared, and a plan so dark, not even the night could hide it. Amina was the kind of woman everyone in Ebula admired. Soft-spoken, always smiling, with a heart that seemed to have space for the whole village. She taught the little ones at the local school under the big neem tree, using songs and sticks in the sand when chalk ran out. Parents trusted her, children adored her, and elders blessed her wherever she went. She had dreams, not loud ones, but deep ones. Building a bigger school, helping orphaned kids, maybe starting a reading corner at the market someday. Her husband, Kofi, was her opposite in many ways. He was smooth with words, carried himself with the confidence of a city man, and dressed sharp even when money was tight. When they first married, people said he was too flashy for humble Amina, but she believed love could smooth out edges, and for a while it did. They laughed, danced under the moon after market days, and cooked together on Sundays. But lately, Kofi had changed. He stayed out longer, whispered into his phone when he thought she was asleep, and flinched when she touched his jacket pocket. Amina tried not to ask too many questions. She believed in patience, in prayer, in second chances. What she didn't know was that Kofi's charm was a mask, hiding the pressure of growing debts, gambling debts, failed business promises. Amina's kindness became Kofi's cover. No one would suspect the devoted husband of having dark thoughts. Still, in a village like Ebula, changes don't go unnoticed for long. Whispers had started. Kofi's eyes no longer smile. Why does he buy goat meat when Amina cooks with fish? Something wasn't right, and the village could feel it, like the air before a storm. Kofi sat under the mango tree one afternoon, staring into nothing while village children chased a ball nearby. His mind was a storm. Debts were mounting, and the lenders from town had stopped smiling. They no longer spoke with words. They showed up with silence and cold eyes, waiting at corners, watching him. Kofi knew he was running out of time. That's when the idea came. Dark, quiet, dangerous. He walked into the city 2 weeks later and signed papers at an insurance office. No one asked many questions. On paper, he looked like a loving husband securing a future. He listed Amina as the insured, 8 million naira. He walked out with trembling hands and a wicked plan planted in his heart. At home, things changed, slowly at first. Kofi became more absent, more tense. He no longer joked with Amina or helped her carry her basket from the school. When she smiled, he looked away. When she laughed, he grew quiet. Amina thought he was stressed. Maybe work, maybe money. She prayed harder. cooked his favorite okra soup, left sweet notes in his pockets, but nothing melted the wall growing between them. Meanwhile, Kofi counted days. He stared at that insurance paper every night like it was a treasure map. In his mind, he had started spending the money already. New clothes, a car, even leaving the village. But there was one thing left in his way, Amina. And each time he looked at her, her soft voice and gentle hands made something inside him hesitate, just for a second. But greed is loud, louder than guilt, and Kofi had made his choice. What he didn't know was that the village was watching, and Abula never forgets. One warm evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky with orange and gold, Kofi came home with a smile Amina hadn't seen in months. He wrapped his arms around her like old times and said, "Let's have dinner together. Just us. No worries, no stress." Amina's heart lit up. She thought maybe the man she married was coming back. Maybe the prayers had worked. She even cried a little as she hugged him back. Kofi told her to invite Sifa too, her young cousin, who stayed with them sometimes after school. "He's like a son," Kofi said warmly. "Let's eat as a family." That touched Amina even more. She rushed to the kitchen, humming an old song, while Kofi watched her quietly from the doorway. His smile didn't reach his eyes. The meal was grander than usual. He insisted on buying fresh meat from the town butcher and even helped cut vegetables. He laid the table himself, lighting a candle in the center like they were courting again. Amina didn't notice how his hands trembled as he stirred the soup, or how he carefully poured a certain powder into only one plate when she stepped outside to fetch water. When Sefer arrived, all smiles and laughter, he was surprised by the feast. He hugged Kofi, joked with Amina, and sat excitedly at the table. As Amina served the food, Kofi made sure everything looked perfect. No one would suspect a thing. He raised a glass and said, "To love, to family." Amina's eyes sparkled with hope. Sefer giggled, already biting into his food. But something was off. The air was too still, too quiet, and the night was about to reveal a truth darker than anyone could imagine. As the delicious aroma of the food filled the small dining room, laughter echoed through the house. Amina moved between the kitchen and the table, smiling brightly. It had been a long time since their home felt this warm. Just as she was about to serve the final plate, her phone rang. It was a call from the school about a student's missing book. She stepped aside to answer, holding the phone to her ear while giving Sifa a gentle nod to wait patiently. The 3 plates were already on the table, carefully placed, one of them poisoned, and only Kofi knew which. Sefer, ever the helpful one, thought he'd make things easier. He noticed Amina's plate was closer to his seat and figured it would save her time if he just pushed it in front of her spot. So, without thinking much, he switched the plates. It was a small gesture, innocent and full of love. But that single movement rewrote the story that Kofi had planned so carefully. Amina returned from the call, unaware of what had just happened. She sat down, thanked them for waiting, and joined in the prayer. Sefer said, sweet and cheerful as always. Kofi's eyes flicked to the plates, then to Amina. He smiled tightly, his hands slightly shaking as he picked up his spoon. Everything was in motion now. They began to eat, unaware of the silent trap that had been shifted. Kofi, thinking everything was perfect, watched Amina closely. But within minutes, it wasn't Amina who coughed. It wasn't Amina whose hands trembled and face turned pale. It was Sefer, and in that moment, everything shattered. The air froze. Amina screamed his name, and Kofi's heart stopped, not from guilt, but from fear. Sefer was laughing just moments before, a spoonful of stew halfway to his mouth, when his smile suddenly vanished. He clutched his stomach, his face twisting in pain. A sharp gasp escaped his lips, and his spoon clattered to the floor. At first, Amina thought he was choking, rushing to his side with concern flooding her eyes. "Sefer, What is it? What's wrong?" she cried, her hands shaking as she tried to hold him upright. But it wasn't choking. His body began to tremble, and sweat broke out across his forehead. His lips turned pale, then blue, and then he collapsed, right there at the dinner table. Amina screamed, pushing her chair back so hard it fell over. She called his name over and over, but Sefer couldn't respond. Kofi stood frozen, eyes wide, his spoon hovering mid-air. It was like the world had stopped moving, time itself holding its breath. Neighbors heard the commotion and ran toward the house, drawn by Amina's cries. Within minutes, the small home was filled with gasps, whispers, and panicked voices. Someone shouted for a doctor. Someone else checked the food. That's when old Mama Tande, the herbalist's wife, sniffed the stew and went still. "This food, it's been touched," she whispered, eyes narrowing. Amina looked at her in confusion. "Touched? What do you mean?" But the answer came before anyone could speak. Sefer's condition, the bitter aftertaste some noticed in the food, the plate that had been meant for her. Slowly, the truth began to rise like smoke. Someone had poisoned the stew, and it wasn't an accident. The cheerful dinner had turned into a nightmare. Amina's hands trembled as she held Sefer, while Kofi stood back, silent and sweating, because he knew what was coming. Baba Nuru arrived quickly, walking with purpose through the panicked crowd that had gathered outside the house. His white beard flowed down his chest, and his walking stick tapped firmly against the floor as the people stepped aside for him. Known across Ebula for his deep knowledge of herbs, roots, and ancient medicines, he carried the calm of someone who had seen too much to be shaken. Inside the house, Amina was on the floor beside Sefer, weeping, while Kofi stood stiff in a corner, his face pale. Without a word, Baba Nuru moved to the table. He picked up the pot of stew and sniffed deeply. Then he dipped his finger lightly into the sauce and touched it to his tongue. Everyone watched in silence. His eyes narrowed. Slowly, he turned to the crowd and spoke in a low but clear voice. "This stew contains ikenga root." Gasps filled the room. Ikenga root was feared in the village. A deadly plant, silent in its poison and nearly impossible to detect without special knowledge. It could stop the heart within minutes, and only those trained in ancient ways could even recognize its presence. "This wasn't a mistake," Baba Nuru said gravely. "This was planned." Amina's mouth fell open. She shook her head in disbelief. "No, no, how? Who would—" The healer looked at Kofi, who was sweating, eyes darting. "Only someone with knowledge of rare herbs could have done this," Baba Nuru added. His voice held weight. The crowd turned slowly toward Kofi. Amina followed their gaze, her chest tightening. In that moment, everything felt quiet again, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence right before a storm breaks open. And Kofi knew his secrets were no longer safe. 2 days passed in a blur of hospital corridors, sleepless nights, and silent prayers. Amina stayed by Sefer's side, holding his hand, whispering to him, begging him to wake up. The doctors said it was a miracle he had survived the poison, but his body was still weak, and his recovery would be slow. She hadn't seen much of Kofi since that night. He claimed he was too shaken, too ashamed, but something inside Amina had shifted. A voice deep within her kept whispering, something wasn't right. On the 3rd day, Amina decided to go home quickly to get fresh clothes and some food for Sefer. She took Kofi's car because hers was low on fuel. As she reached into the glove compartment for tissues, a thick brown envelope fell out. Curious, she opened it. Inside were insurance documents, her name printed clearly at the top. Her heart stopped. It was a life insurance policy worth 8 million naira, taken out just 2 months ago, signed by Kofi. Her blood ran cold. Why hadn't he told her? Why was it hidden? She scanned the pages, her hands trembling. Everything became clear. His sudden distance, the fake smiles, the awkward dinner. That plate wasn't meant for Sefer. It was meant for her. The food, the poison, the plan, it was all there in the silence of those papers. Amina clutched the envelope to her chest as tears filled her eyes. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a plan to erase her, for money. The man she had loved, defended, and trusted had tried to take her life, but fate had other plans. And now, the truth was in her hands. The sun hadn't even reached its peak when the village square of Ebola filled with murmurs and tense footsteps. The elders had called for an urgent gathering. Amina stood at the center, holding the brown envelope with the insurance papers, her face calm but firm. Beside her was Baba Nuru, and around them the townsfolk gathered, whispering Kofi's name like a storm about to break. When Kofi was finally brought forward, escorted by 2 strong farmers who'd found him trying to leave the village before dawn, he looked like a ghost, nervous, sweaty, and cornered. Elder Omaja stepped forward with his staff and voice of thunder. "Kofi, do you deny taking out a secret insurance policy on Amina's life?" Kofi stuttered, his eyes darting to Amina, then to the crowd. But no words came. Amina lifted the papers and showed them to everyone. The silence broke like glass. People gasped. Someone shouted, "You tried to kill her!" And then, like a dam bursting, secrets spilled. Elder Omaja continued, "We know of your gambling debts, Kofi. You owe nearly 5 million naira to men from the next town. You thought you could solve it by killing your wife." Kofi dropped to his knees, stammering, "I didn't mean for Sifa to... I was desperate." The crowd erupted with shock and anger. Women covered their mouths, children clung to mothers, and men shook their heads in disbelief. Baba Nuru stepped forward, eyes hard. Desperation is no excuse for murder. Then, Elder Omaja revealed the final blow. "We know you booked a bus ticket to Lagos under another name, planning to disappear after the accident, but fate had other plans. The poison found the wrong mouth, and your sins followed you home." And just like that, Kofi's lies crumbled under the weight of truth. Amina stood quietly as the angry crowd slowly began to calm, her eyes steady and full of a new kind of strength. She could feel the weight of betrayal crushing her chest, but deep inside, she knew she had to rise above pain and anger. Revenge would only trap her in darkness. Justice, however, would set her and the village free. She raised her voice, clear and unwavering. Kofi must answer for what he tried to do, not just for me, but for Sifa and for all of us. With the village elders backing her, Amina worked with the local authorities to make sure Kofi faced the law. The evidence was undeniable. The insurance papers, the poison, the confession. The village gathered support, and no one dared to stand with Kofi anymore. When he was finally taken away, handcuffed and silent, Amina didn't feel victory or hatred, just relief that the nightmare was over and justice was served. But Amina didn't stop there. She turned her heartbreak into hope. With the community behind her, she started raising funds and awareness to build a school in Sefa's name, a place where children from Ebola and nearby villages could learn without fear. She wanted Sefa's struggle to become a light for others, a symbol of resilience and care. Slowly, bricks were laid, books were bought, and teachers were hired. Her story spread beyond the village, through social media and word of mouth, drawing support from across the country. People admired her courage, her forgiveness, and her vision. Amina knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with every child who walked through the new school gates, she saw a future brighter than the shadows Kofi had tried to cast. In choosing justice over revenge, Amina not only saved herself, but planted seeds of hope that would bloom for generations. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Remember, justice and forgiveness are stronger than revenge. Choose the path that uplifts and heals.